Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Matt Johnson. I'm the Communications Director for USAID's Office of Acquisition and Assistance, as well as the agency's Industry Liaison. Got a couple colleagues that are joining me. We've got Rachel Chilton, who is the deputy on my team, both as a Deputy Communications Director and Deputy Industry Liaison, as well as Jonathan Chappell, who's a Senior Contracting Officer working on our programs around the world. So we're happy to be able to talk to you this morning, at least this morning for us, depending on where you're located. Before we get started, I'd love for folks to type into the chat box sort of your name, where you're located, the name of your organization, and then be curious to know whether or not you've worked with USAID before. But what we want to do today is really kind of give you an overview of kind of what are some of the basics, kind of how to work with USAID 101. And so what we want to do is talk a little bit about, who USAID is, an organization that Rachel going to go through, give you a little bit of background about the history of USAID, some of the key documents, some of the key information, things that you need to know in order to be able to partner with USAID. Talk a little bit about kind of what the partnership process looks like. How do you go about finding funding opportunities? Where do you go to kind of do market research for kind of upcoming things? What are some of the initiatives that would potentially be impacting the work that you're doing? As well as information, kind of how you can stay connected to us after this webinar. So it's really a pleasure to be speaking with you. And while we're going through the presentation, I would encourage you to type in questions into the chat box. Both Jonathan, Rachel, and myself are happy to answer whatever questions you have while we're going through this presentation. So please feel free to do that. And with that, I want to turn it over now to my colleague, Rachel, just to talk a little bit about kind of who USAID is and a little bit about our history and some of the key things that you need to know about the agency if you're interested in partnering with us. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to be here to be able to speak with you about USAID. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Matt, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So USAID, as any other agency or organization, has a unique history, culture, and way of doing business. This is very important to understand as you think about becoming a partner of USAID and think about trying to compete for USAID funding. The agency carries out U.S. foreign policy by improving the lives and well-being of people living in poverty and at the same time expanding democracy and promoting free markets. All of our work is separate from political and military assistance. Although our work is separate from political and military assistance, USAID programs address both security and development objectives. We work hard to build a world that is safer, healthier, and more prosperous for people everywhere. So the United States is the world's largest donor of foreign assistance, which I'm sure many of you know. We are extending a helping hand from the American people to millions of women, children, and men who live in poverty and are among the most vulnerable in the world. We work to improve their lives in a variety of ways, including investing in agricultural productivity so that families don't go hungry, combating maternal and child mortality and diseases like HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis, as well as Ebola and currently COVID-19. Providing life-saving assistance in the wake of disaster. So for instance, hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, as well as famine. Promoting democracy, human rights, and good governance around the world. Fostering private sector development and sustainable economic growth. Helping communities adapt to a changing environment. Elevating the role of women and girls in all of our work, and so much more. So our global team works in more than 100 countries around the world. USAID has offices overseas that are called missions, which are typically co-located with US embassies in the capital of each country in which we work. So for instance, I actually had the chance about a year and a half ago to work in our mission at the embassy in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So I really enjoyed my time there. We also have a number of regional missions that serve to implement specific regional programs. So in Africa, that would include our East Africa Regional Mission in Kenya, our West Africa Regional Mission in Ghana, and then Southern Africa. So depending on the sector of work and if relevant, We will work closely with our US State Department colleagues at Post, as well as our counterparts from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also known as the CDC, and potentially our counterparts from the Department of Defense, also known as DoD. We are organized in 3 major staffing categories. We have foreign service officers who are US citizens that work in US embassies worldwide. Civil service employees like Matt and myself, who are US citizens who work in Washington, D.C. and other areas throughout the United States, as well as our foreign service nationals who work at USAID and our global offices at our missions, but who are natives to the respective country. At the heart of our work is the core belief that each country must lead its own development journey. Our vision is to empower grassroots efforts in local communities. We are making progress towards that goal by realigning how we work and partner so that we better support our partner countries. So this means essentially enabling a country's capacity to plan, finance, and implement solutions to local development challenges, and a commitment to see these through effectively, inclusively, and with accountability. USAID is therefore strategic in the types of activities and programs that we implement. So the agency has a tool that's called the program cycle, and it looks at how we link everything we do. So from policies to strategic planning, to program design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, and then how we incorporate all of those lessons learned back into our policies. In addition, in Washington, we have a number of policies, strategies, frameworks, and visions that guide how we work. So for example, we have a global water strategy that outlines how we implement water programs around the world. We also have gender policies that outline how we try to incorporate gender into every program and activity we do. And then on the flip side, at each mission at USAID, we have what are called country development cooperation strategies, and these are known as the CDCS. So the CDCS governs USAID's work locally in that particular country. So typically, these are 5-year strategies that outlines the different goals in technical areas in each country. We also have something called the Automated Directive System, better known as the ADS, which is the agency's operational policies and procedures. So as you'll learn momentarily when Matt takes over, when responding to a proposal or request for application, incorporating all of these different documents into your approach and into your plans will help increase the likelihood of you being able to receive funding from the agency. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt, and he will discuss our acquisition and assistance process more in depth. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel highlighted, there are just, we wanted to give you just a little bit of background about who USAID is, some of the key documents that you need to know really to begin partnering or looking at partnering and working with USAID. So just to give you a little bit of a sense as we kind of transition now to the partnering process or looking at how to work with USAID, right here on this chart gives you a little bit of a breakdown of our funding and kind of the different types of sectors and areas where our funding went last year. As you can see, the largest piece of our work or portion of our work is related to our health programs. That was particularly the case this past year with COVID-19, but also a large part of our work is responding to disasters, humanitarian assistance work. So this gives you a kind of a sense of like all of our programs globally of the work that we're doing. Last year, our budget or our programs for our program budget was around $21.4 billion. And I know that seems like a lot of money, but when you break it down by countries, by programs, when we're working kind of all over the world, we, as Rachel highlighted, we have to be very strategic about the types of programs and activities that we can take on, the types of programs that we fund. And so looking at kind of how we fund our work. So USAID, we are a US government organization, which means that all of our funding comes from the American taxpayers. American taxpayer dollars come into our budget and fund our work. We don't receive any type of private donations. We don't get any other kind of funding from other organizations. It all is from the American taxpayers. But importantly, USAID's budget is set by our Congress, as well as our executive office or our president. And so our budget priorities, kind of how our funding is organized and outlined, is set each year by our political leaders within the United States. Our funding levels are then set by Congress, and then what we try to do is use our country development cooperation strategies, or CDCSs, as Rachel highlighted, really outline our priorities of how we're actually going to go about funding specific programs or activities, or what are the work that we're going to undertake and what we're going to do. And then out of that, organizations compete for USAID funding. So, oftentimes I think a lot of folks we're meeting with or engaging with, I think we're kind of like a private foundation or just a grant making organization. We just kind of hand out money. That's not really true, because we have all of these kind of requirements both by our Congress, by our executive office of our president, as well as kind of strategies that are guiding and outlining the work that we do. And so it's really important as an organization, if you're interested in partnering or working with USAID, to figure out what is the alignment between the work that you as an organization are doing, kind of what are USAID's priorities and the work that we're doing. All of our country development cooperation strategies are available on the agency's website for you to see and take a look at. And so it's a great place for you to begin thinking about or looking at if there's specific countries or specific sectors, areas that you're interested in working in. I would encourage you to take a look at those. USAID each year, one of the things I love about USAID is we work with over 3,000 organizations each year. You may be on this webinar asking kind of, is my organization, the type of organization that USAID is interested in partnering in? The answer is more than likely yes. We have a ton of different organizations, whether you're a local organization, a for-profit or non-for-profit group, a scientist, innovator, whatever it is. We work with all these different types of organizations on an annual basis. And we're always looking for new partners, new organizations to work with us. One of the things that I want to kind of briefly highlight is the agency's acquisition and assistance strategy. Most of this document is not really relevant to you at all, except for the first two things I want to talk about. So first of all, is kind of looking at diversifying our partner base. So the acquisition assistance strategy really outlines what are some of the guiding principles that we as an organization want to take as we look at partnering with organizations. So first and foremost, we want to look at how we can bring in new organizations into our work. Yes, we have over 3,000 organizations, but we know that there's so many more organizations that are out there that are doing amazing work that can really have an impact in the countries and the communities that we're serving. So we want to bring in those organizations into the work that we're doing. But we know in order to do that, we need to simplify the process. We need to change how we partner. I'm not sure if any of you have ever applied for USAID funding before or looked at trying to work with USAID, but it can be a complicated process. It's not always the easiest process. We're not always the easiest organization to work with. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we are a US government organization and we have to follow US government rules and regulations set by our Congress. But there are things that we can do to really simplify the process. So one of the things that we launched back in 2019 is our new partnerships initiative, which is really looking at how we can bring in new organizations, how can we simplify the process, how we can diversify ourselves and really kind of elevate local organizations, bring in new partners to the agency's work and really multiply our development impact. So our new partnerships initiative really kind of focuses on three key areas that I want to briefly highlight. So first, with the new partnerships initiative, if you're an organization that's new to USAID, we have specific funding opportunities specifically set up for organizations that are new or underutilized to USAID. And we classify a new organization as organizations that receive less than $5 million over the last 5 years. And an underutilized partner is organizations that receive less than $25 million from USAID over the last 5 years. And so we have specific funding opportunities that are set up, trying to target and reach these organizations that are new or underutilized to USAID. We have these funding opportunities available on our website. If you go to usaid.gov/NPI, you can find the ones that are currently available or open right now there. We're also looking at how can we take our organizations that are used to working with USAID and how can we kind of partner with them to bring in new organizations as well. So we've had a number of mentoring awards where we work with our kind of more traditional partners, organizations that are used to working with USAID, and we ask them to bring in new partners, bring in local partners, underutilized partners, and mentor them and kind of walk them through the process of what does it mean to actually manage US government funding? What does it mean to actually work with USAID? And as a part of that, one of the requirements of these awards is that a minimum 50% of their funding has to go to new partners. And then the third piece of this is looking at leveraging awards. And so how can we, if there's organizations, private organizations that are out there that maybe have some private funding, how can we kind of step in and help maybe match dollar for dollar, or $2 to every $1 that you've been able to raise privately as a part of your work? And so these are kind of three ways that we've looked at trying to simplify the process of bringing organizations in. One of the things that I'm kind of most excited about with the new partnerships initiative is we have something called the Partnerships Incubator. And the Incubator is a team of folks that are specifically looking at how can we build our own internal capacity. So looking at ourselves internally, how can we develop our own staff, give them the tools and resources to be able to partner and engage and work with new organizations. Then also, how can we equip and engage organizations that are outside of USAID, or organizations that are trying to work with USAID? How can we give you the tools and information that you need to be able to partner with us? And so our Partnerships Incubator, working with them, we've been working on a platform, a Work with USAID platform that really tries to bring in a whole host of tools and resources that are available for organizations that are interested in working with USAID, or more broadly working in the international development community. So we don't have a timeline for when we're going to launch the website yet, but it's in development. I'm really excited about it. But some of the kind of cool things that I think will be really beneficial to organizations that are new to USAID. First of all, we have a pre-engagement assessment. So we have an assessment, I think it's 49 questions, lets you take this simple assessment and really determine what is your readiness kind of today to be able to work with USAID. Out of that assessment, you'll be able to identify specific areas of your organization or maybe experience that you need to strengthen to be in a better position to be able to compete for USAID funding. But out of that pre-engagement assessment, we have something called a readiness plan that really helps you kind of track your readiness to be able to work with USAID, as well as specific trainings and resources available for you to help actually build some of that capacity to be able to be in a better position to compete for funding. One of the other things that I think is really excited about this platform is a partner directory. One of the questions we get asked, who are the 3,000 organizations that work with USAID? We have that information. It's publicly available on our website, but it's sometimes hard to make connections to those organizations if we look at organizations kind of partnering and working with each other collaboratively to compete for USAID funding. The partner directory is going to be a resource and tool that you can register your organization on the website, but you can also research and identify other organizations that are out there doing development work. But then on the flip side, internally, USAID staff, we can go on and do market research to identify what organizations are out, working in this particular sector, this particular area of Kenya, for example. And so it gives us gives you a place to be able to identify yourself to USAID, to other organizations, and will really be a really helpful tool and resource. And so we're excited for the website when it gets launched. We will definitely let you know when we close up. Rachel will share some ways to get connected to us and ways to make sure you're informed when this new website platform launches. So I want to shift now a little bit to how we fund our work and activities. And so USAID, almost all of its funding for programs goes through two mechanisms: acquisition or assistance. Acquisition is a term basically referring to contracts where USAID purchases goods and services in order to kind of further our goals and objectives. Under a contract, organization is allowed to receive profit for the work that they're doing. So if you're a for-profit organization, you're more than likely most interested in working with USAID through acquisition or a contract. All of the funding opportunities for USAID for contracts are all available on sam.gov. And we solicit these things for contracts through something called requests for proposals, or RFPs. So if you go to sam.gov, you'll see probably 30 or 40 currently available contracts where we're looking for organizations to partner with USAID. We're inviting organizations to submit proposals to USAID in different programs or activities. And so that's kind of one way. That represents probably about a third of our overall funding and budget through contracts. The other 2/3 is on the assistance side. Assistance refers to something called grants or cooperative agreements. A grant, as you can probably imagine, USAID is giving you money to do work. We have kind of limited involvement in the work or activity. A cooperative agreement is kind of a mix between a grant and a contract. We're giving you money to do work or activity, but we're going to have some involvement in the work overall that we're doing. All of the agency's grants are posted on grants.gov. These are US government-wide websites where all funding opportunities are available. So if you go there, you'll have to kind of sort and search or filter by USAID. But you can find every funding opportunity that's available on these websites. Grants, we use something called Notice of Funding Opportunities or Request for Applications, a NOFO or RFA. And so you'll see on these websites different funding opportunities specifically related to grants. And so this is the main place where almost every single funding opportunity for USAID is available. Like I said, you can go on the website right now to search and sort and try and find maybe something that you would be potentially interested in. But even before things go on grants.gov or sam.gov, we have something called a business forecast. The forecast looks at what are things that we are planning on doing over the next year to year and a half. And so before anything ever gets posted on sam.gov, before anything gets posted on grants.gov, we post information on our business forecast that's available on our website. The forecast is updated daily, pulling from our internal planning systems. And it really gives you kind of the best snapshot or view of what is upcoming from USAID. What are some ways that you can potentially partner and engage and work with USAID? Organizations that work with USAID on a regular basis, the second they actually see an activity or something appear on the business forecast, they actually start to do market research. What other programs or activities is the agency doing in this area? Who are some of the key people, key technical experts that we maybe want to bring on board? And so when activities go in the business forecast, they actually start to begin to prepare their proposals, get together their teams, get together some of the information that they need to, again, to compete for USAID funding. I'll just say, if you're looking on sam.gov or grants.gov right now for a funding opportunity, you're probably already 3 to 6 months behind a lot of other organizations and even beginning to prepare information to submit to USAID. And so we have the business forecast as a tool, really as a resource to kind of help level the playing field for organizations that maybe don't have the global footprint or global presence of many of the larger organizations. On this screen or snapshot, you'll see, funding opportunity in Serbia right now. This is just a sample or snapshot of what you see on the business forecast. But you'll see, information about what type of award it is, whether it's a contract, going to be a contract, cooperative agreement, or grant. When we're planning on actually releasing a solicitation, how much money it's going to be worth, a short description. It also gives you a kind of a change log, so you're able to actually track as the forecast is updated on a daily basis, what information was changed, what was updated. And so it's really an important tool that I would encourage you to take a look at. One of the things I would also note, with our business forecast, we do a quarterly outreach and engagement. We just did this 2 weeks ago, where we actually invite any organization to submit questions to us at businessforecast@usaid.gov. Any question you have related to an upcoming funding opportunity, you can submit questions to us. We answer all those questions and then share them out on our website and host a webinar just to give organizations an update on what's happening. If you go to usaid.gov/business forecast right now, you can see our last webinar update that we did. And I think, there are probably 500, 600 questions that we received, and we answered almost all of them. You can sort and search them by different countries, by different sectors and programs. It's really a great tool or resource to you to do some market research and find, what are some of the upcoming priorities, activities, things that are happening with the agency. So I can't, highlight or stress the importance of the business forecast enough, because it really is just such an important tool for organizations that are interested in partnering with USAID. So definitely take a look at the business forecast. One of the things I want to highlight, though, is the eligibility of international organizations. I've seen people, some folks commenting that they were from Spain, from Kenya, I think Nigeria, as well as other countries. I'm sure there's many different countries that are on the webinar. So, you may be wondering, is my organization eligible to work with USAID? So we communicate kind of what organizations are eligible through something called the Principal Geographic Code. If you look on our business forecast, you'll see Principal Geographic Code listed on the business forecast for every activity to help you identify, what organizations would be eligible to compete for it. But we kind of have 3 main codes. Code 937, which is looking at US-based organizations or organizations that are basically located in developing countries, either the country that we're working in or in the kind of the developing country overall. We have a code specifically set up for organizations that are based in some of the former Soviet Union states, or we have the other code where we're looking at, I think it's 935, for organizations that are, any country is eligible to apply for funding. So you can kind of use this as a gauge, if I'm located in Spain, for example, can I compete for this particular activity? So the principal geographic code lets you know whether or not your organization is eligible. But one of the things I do want to note, if your organization is based in Spain, but you have a field office based in Kenya, you may be eligible to compete for the funding if there's something is advertised as Principal Geographic Code 937. I would encourage you to reach out to the point of contact that's listed on the business forecast. If you see something that maybe you're interested in, your organization has experience in working in, reach out to the particular point of contact that's listed on the business forecast to see if that's something that you could maybe, as an organization, compete for. So we've talked a little bit about, where to find funding opportunities, how to do some market research. I want to share just a couple of tips for submitting a proposal or application to USAID. These are very basic tips, but honestly, for organizations that are new to USAID, these are the areas, these are the things that we see people get tripped up over and over again on. And so first and foremost, read the entire solicitation carefully. Solicitations can be somewhere around 40 to 50 pages long. But in that solicitation is all of the information you need to know for what you need to submit to USAID, how your proposal or application is going to be evaluated, what the process is going to look like, what are the goals and objectives that the agency is trying to achieve. It's so important to read the entire solicitation carefully. Everything you need to know is available in that document when you're applying for funding. But there may be terms or things that are in there that are maybe a little bit confusing, or you want to get further clarity. For almost every funding opportunity that the agency has, we have an open period of questions where we invite organizations to submit questions. And so we issue a request for proposals. Maybe the first week that request for proposal is out there, we say, if you have any questions about the solicitation, please email us. We'll answer those questions, and then we publish the answers to everyone's questions on our website. And so if there's something that you're not sure about, please ask questions, seek clarity on it. That way you can use that to inform what you actually put together in your proposal or application. Third, and probably most important, follow the instructions. It is a competitive process to get USAID funding, and there are other organizations that are competing for funding as well. And so we try and have a level playing field that everyone is able to compete against one another fairly. If organizations aren't following the instructions or guidelines that are outlined as solicitation, then we really most of the time we have to kind of throw out that proposal up front before we even get a chance to review it. And there's nothing worse than knowing that organizations put together weeks or months or days on a proposal, and it has to be thrown out because they didn't follow the instructions. The instructions are always outlined in the solicitation, so please, please, please follow the instructions. It is so important. But one of the things that USAID is really looking at when you submit a proposal or application to USAID, what is your technical expertise? What is your past performance? What is your experience? And what is your ability to accomplish the work in the future? And so, with USAID, because we're a US government agency, we are managing taxpayer dollars. I would say there can be a little bit of risk aversion. We want to know, we may not be looking for the most innovative or creative idea that someone has ever put together. We're looking for someone that has the experience and past performance and has the ability to do it, like maybe can demonstrate that they've done it in the past and demonstrate to us that they know how to do this again in the future. It's really one of the things I think we're always looking for is this organization able to manage US government funding and be able to effectively help us achieve the goals and objectives that are outlined in the application or proposal. And so that's what we're really looking for. We're really looking for what is your technical expertise and experience in this particular area. And I think when you're putting together a proposal, I think it's very important to be very clear and specific. The solicitation, like I said, it'll have specific instructions, information that we're looking for. Be as clear and concise as possible in it. Don't put us in a position where you have to make assumptions about maybe your past performance or experience, or can they do this? We think we can do this. If we're in a position of kind of making assumptions about your proposal or about your experience, more often than not, we're going to probably pass on the work that you're doing. And not look to partner with you. And then finally, consider partnering with organizations that have experience working with USAID. That's one of the best ways, honestly, to get your foot in the door, is partner with organizations that have worked with USAID in the past. And like I said, once we get this new partner directory up and running, you'll be able to easily identify and see all those groups. We do have an annual progress report that lists our top 30 partners that's available that we can share with you as well. But consider partnering with organizations that have experience working with USAID. Just like USAID is talking about diversifying its partner base, looking at new partners, working with more local partners, the organizations that work with USAID on a regular basis, they're thinking the same thing. How can they find new organizations to partner with? How can they bring in new groups to their work? How can they find more local partners? And so they are always interested in finding good organizations that they can partner with to work with USAID. So definitely consider taking a look at that. And one of the questions that we get asked on a regular time, what is the registration process to be able to work with USAID? So importantly, we don't have a formal registration process. There isn't like a side list of vendors that we go to all the time asking for information all the time. That doesn't really exist at USAID. But there is a broader registration process that every organization to manage US government funding, not just USAID funding, but any organization that wants to manage US government funding has to be registered in 3 systems. You must have a DUNS number, a CAGE or NCAGE code, and then be registered in SAM, or the System for Award Management. These are the 3 systems that you're required to be registered in order to get US government funding. Unfortunately, we don't own these systems, and so they are a bit cumbersome, and it can be a bit challenging if you're particularly an international organization. But these are 3 systems that I would encourage you, if you're interested in working with USAID, going through the process and registering for them. We have a great video called Registration Expectation, as well as a helpful tip guide available on our website. I think Rachel probably dropped the link in the chat box in a second, that kind of helps you walk through the process of kind of getting prepared. There's a bunch of information and documents you need to know to get registered in these systems. And we have a helpful guide and a helpful video that kind of gets you prepared to walk through these systems to be registered. So with that, I want to turn it over to Rachel now, just to highlight briefly kind of ways that you can get connected or stay connected to us and the work that we're doing, and then we'll be happy to take some of the questions that you have afterwards. So over to you, Rachel.
Great, thank you so much. I know that Matt threw a lot of information at you, and then I did in the chat box as well. I promise I only have a few more links to send to everyone in the chat box. We just wanted to highlight a few ways that you can stay connected with us. I'll also drop in the chat box here. We have a great set of training modules that you can learn more about different topics for how to work with USAID, from understanding USAID awards to trying to learn how to explore funding opportunities, adhering to our branding and marketing guides, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and there are a lot of different modules there, so we would encourage you to take a look at those. If you would like to join our ANA, our Acquisition and Assistance email distribution list, you can email us at I'll type it in the chat here, industryliaison@usaid.gov. You're also more than welcome to email us if you have any specific questions at any time. Our team is happy to chat with you, happy to answer your questions. So again, if you'd like to be added to our email distribution list, or if you just have questions, please feel free to email us. You can also follow us on Twitter at workwithusaid. So we do try to post funding opportunities and different partner resources there, whether it's different tips of the day, training, upcoming events, things like that. So please feel free to follow us on Twitter. And we also have a LinkedIn group called Work with USAID that you're more than welcome to join. We post the same kind of content there as well. So we'd be happy to have you join us there. And with that, I think that is all of the information and links we have for you today. Happy to open it up to any questions people might have.
Thanks, Rachel. If you do have a question, you can feel free to type it into the chat box. We welcome questions there. And, as Rachel highlighted, while folks if they have questions typing into the chat box, like Rachel said, you can always email us at industryliaison@usaid.gov. We do a lot of kind of like one-on-one consultations with organizations. I know as a part of this conference, we'll be doing a number of them as well. Does USAID, one of the questions that just came through, does USAID work on elections? We do provide election support around the world. If you look at our programs around our democracy and governance work, we do a lot of support to elections. I don't know, Jonathan Chappelle is also online. Jonathan is one of our senior regional advisors for all of our programs in Africa. Jonathan is a foreign service officer, spent a lot of time overseas. I don't know, Jonathan, if there's anything you wanted to share or add to the group, just more generally or broadly about, partnering and working with USAID.
Excuse me, sure. I mean, I think this presentation has been extremely thorough and covered the vast majority of ways to work with USAID, but there's some others to keep an eye out for, especially if you're a new organization looking to get in with USAID. We at times have open innovation type or open competitions. So look for those where they're a little bit more broad and general in nature, like they're called either open competitions or grand challenges. The one that's pretty that's ongoing is called the Development Innovation Ventures Program. So you can take a look at that, because that is extremely open towards any new group, especially with an innovative approach that would like to work with USAID. So look for those in addition to the advertised sort of grants.gov, sam.gov, contract and grant solicitations as have already been described. And I would stress as Matt put it, registering in advance on the various websites, getting your DUNS number, NCAGE or CAGE code, registering at SAM. That is a huge problem for a lot of new organizations trying to work with USAID. So if you can set that up in advance, that is really good advice. So I'll leave it there and see if there's any more questions.
I see a question coming in. Do you have to be a U.S. company to be a USAID vendor? The answer is no, you don't have to be a U.S. company. We work with organizations around the world. Certainly there are funding opportunities that are more set up or geared towards US-based organizations, but broadly speaking, we work with organizations from every country, pretty much every country around the world. So you do not have to be a US-based organization to be able to partner with USAID. I'm happy to stay online for a couple more minutes for folks if you have other questions, but we do really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us this morning. It's morning for us, or this afternoon or evening, wherever you're located. We really enjoyed hearing from you and just getting a chance to speak with you. And like we've said, please feel free to reach out to us and email us at any time. We're happy to connect and engage with you further as a part of this conference and workshop. So I see a question from David Ramirez about the next gen timelines you can share. Unfortunately, we don't have any updates or timelines. Next gen is a USAID and global health set of programs that the agency is working on. So we do not have any updates on that. We do have a website that's set up, I'm sure probably David you're familiar with, that provides updates on our next gen programs. I'll just type the link in the chat box for you. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it.